So we're discussing Melachot Shabbat, and now the issue of Toladot, Avot and Toladot, literally the fathers and the children. So originally in the Talmud also uses the term Toladot as children or subcategories regarding purity and impurity, and Avot Nezikin, and damages. But there are different. The way you look at each one of them, it's not exactly the same process. It's just the same term. When we talk about Avot Tum'ah, it's really about the source of purity, which is considered the father of Tum'ah, and Toladot Tum'ah or Velad Tum'ah, the child, is the secondary source of impurity. Meaning, if something that was that contracted impurity touched another thing, then now this second object becomes Sheni Tum'ah Velad, and just like a process of a father who gives who has a child, with Avot Nezikin, the what we call this, the categories of damages and subcategories of damages, there is no difference in the level of severity or seriousness of the damage. It's just how you file them. So again, when you talk about Tum'ah and Tahara, purity and impurity, the first level is more severe or of a higher level than the second level. But when we talk about damages or Shabbat, it's just a system of filing the prohibitions or the damages. The question is, the real question that the commentators struggle with is, what makes a certain prohibition an av, like the category, the father, and what makes it a tolada, a subcategory or a child? So, according to Professor Gilat, according to the way he understood that, what happened was that the first stage was the creation of the list, that Hachamim looked at the original Isurei Shabbat, and they saw that people were too strict. The rabbis of the Mishnah realized that the previous generation were very, very strict. They had no definition, so they said everything is forbidden. So they created a list to be as a source of reference. So mostly what made it into the list became Av, and what didn't make it became Tolada, and then, meaning it became secondary, and then they had to file it according to a certain system. Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, says the following: how do you define Av et Tolada? He says, in chapter 7 of Melachot Shabbat, he brings the whole list as mentioned in the Mishnah, and he says, Kol elu ha-melachot v'chol shehu me'inyanam hema nikraim avot melachot. All these works mentioned in the Mishnah, and all which is similar me'inyanam hema nikraim avot melachot. They're called the fathers, or the categories. כיצד העניינן? אחד החורש החופר העושה חריץ הרי זהב מלאכה, שכל אחת ואחת מהן חפירה בקרקע ועניין אחד. Whether you plow or you dig a hole or you just do a long ditch in the ground, it's considered the Av, the category, because they're all about digging in the ground. וכן אחד הזורע זרעים או נוטע אילנות או מבריך או מרכיב או זומר, like we mentioned yesterday, whether you sow seeds or you plant saplings or you graft or trim the tree in order to make it grow better, they're all one inyan, because your intention is to make the tree grow better. And וכן אחד הקוצר תבואה או קטנית, like we mentioned yesterday, whether you harvest any of the foods. התולדה היא המלאכה הדומה לאב מאלו האבות. And the secondary type, or the subcategory, is something which is has certain resemblance, but it's not מאותו עניין, it's not the same exact thing. כיצד? המחתך את הירק מעט מעט לבשלו, הרי זה חייב שזו המלאכה תולדת טחינה, שהטוחן לוקח גוף אחד ומחלקו לגופים הרבה. It says if you chop vegetables very, very finely in order to, for example, to cook it, it's like grinding. It's toladat hina, because the grinding is taking one object and turning it into many smaller pieces. Now, the problem with this, when you say that it has certain resemblance, is that when you grind flour, when you grind wheat into flour, you're changing the texture of the wheat and the way you can handle it, right? Because if you cannot bake wheat into bread, right? Even before it becomes a hard grain, if you eat sprouted bread that's all sprout, it's just a heavy object. I mean, it's a heavy thing that you can't eat easily. It has to be ground into flour in order for the molecules to bind with whatever you put it with, and then for the dough to rise. When you take a vegetable and you cut it finely, it's just you took one big piece and you made it smaller. There's no difference in the texture. It takes maybe less time to cook, but it wouldn't be that different. So the resemblance is not so clear. So וכל העושה את הדבר הדומה לזה הרי זה תולדת טוחן, וכן הלוקח לשון של מתכת ושף אותו כדי לקח מעפרו כדרך שעושים צורפי הזהב, הרי זו תולדת טחינה. It says if you take a piece of metal and you file it in order to use the dust, the gold dust, for example, for make jewelry, whatever it is, this is like tohen. And here again, this is like how exactly this is where we have the struggle. How is this tohen? This is not grinding. You're chopping off small pieces of the original one. In any case, this is what Rambam says. Now he wants to give us an example of toladat borer, of the subcategory for filtering. הלוקח חלב ונתן בו קיבה כדי לחביצו, הרי זה חייב משום תולדת borer. If you take milk, a jug of milk, and you put in it the intestines of an animal to turn it into cheese. הרי זה חייב משום תולדת בורר, שהרי הפריש הקום מן החלב, because you separate certain parts of the milk from the milk and you turn it into cheese. That's interesting because he doesn't say there's a problem of meat and dairy. You realize that because this is how they used to make cheese. You take the intestine of the animal that contains the digestive juices, enzymes, and you put it there, and that's what they will consider meat and dairy. Ve'im gibno v'oseh gvina hayav mishum boneh. And if you turn it into cheese, so just putting the intestines into the milk and separating certain elements of the milk from one another is filtering. Even though, again, it's not the same exact. If you really want to be legally purist, and you want to see if it's exactly the same thing, when you sift, all the ways that sifting or filtering is mentioned in the Mishnah, one directly separates the food from the non-food. Meaning you take the stones and you put them out, or you sift flour in a sieve, and only the fine flour goes through. But when you put when the action of putting this piece of intestine into the milk is one action it's over, right? After you put the intestine in the milk, you walk back. That's it. You're not involved anymore. The process starts later. It's an automatic process. Yes, you started it, but it's you were not involved, right, in the actual making of it. You have an objection?
No, I don't have an objection. It's a way of thinking about certain things.
Right. Okay. Okay. No, because I want to hear that, because there is
because the issue here is who is the person or what action initiates what happens.
Right.
This separates the consequences from the initiator of the action.
No, I'm separating. He doesn't. He says, if you started, so that would be similar to shooting an arrow. That would be the thing. I shot an arrow, right? And the arrow has a certain trajectory, and it's going to hit someone. This is in the laws of damage. It's called Isho Mishum Hitzav. What if? So there's an interesting question in the Gemara. What if someone shot an arrow towards a target? Nothing, just practicing, and someone else passed by after the arrow was already left the bow and got damaged. Right? Is it the responsibility of the shooter? In Chot Shabbat, it's different. I mean, there is room to say that it's different because you're only hayav, you're only punishable or obligated for things that you are involved directly in doing. So that's it. For example, the Gemara says if you put a bread in the oven, right? There's a debate whether you're allowed to take it out before it's baked to save you from the prohibition of baking. Meaning that if it's left there and it keeps baking, it will be your one's responsibility. But in a way, it's not. In the oven, it starts baking the moment you put it in, so you could minimize the damage. In any case, so Rambam says, כל המקבץ חלק אל חלק ודיבק הכל עד שיעשו גוף אחד, הרי זה דומה לבניין. So he says it has to, if you take many small parts and you put them together, it's like building. But here, I think it's the legal leap is even greater to say that making cheese from milk is construction, because it's not construction that's connected to the ground. It's not something that you do physically. It's so anything that I remember that once I had we were talking about the Chot Shabbat with a friend who was a chemist by profession and very scientific mind, and I mentioned to him the argument of Erich Fromm, who speaks in general about the Shabbat prohibitions, that this is when a way for us to not get involved with nature, meaning we become passive and let nature do its thing. So he argued back. He says that this is ridiculous. I cannot accept this argument because otherwise you're not allowed to eat. Because when you eat, you break down certain the enzymes break. You change nature by eating. So if I take this argument and apply it to this issue, right, we'll say that if you consider this to be construction, that eating also you break things apart and they reconstruct it in your stomach. So where do you draw the line between what is asul, what is mutar? So there was an interesting question about the definition of the melachot, of the words. The author of Tiferet Israel, Rabbi Israel Lipschutz, who wrote a commentary to the Mishnah, Tiferet Israel, he says that it has to be if a certain work is similar to the top category in both the type of action and the outcome, then it's considered another, like of the high level of av. But if the end is different, meaning like just what the example that Maimonides brought of filing metal to make fine dust, so it's not for the same purpose, because with grinding it's for the purpose of eating, for this is for the purpose of decoration or whatever. But all these are very forced definitions, and if you look at the process of the development of halakha, you realize that what happened was just in any legal process, the way law is being written, you phrase a certain law, and then a question comes up. Then now you have to redefine the law, redefine reality, right? What happened this week is a great example. The travel ban. It was crafted, it was drafted. Some people say in a haste, right? Now many, as an afterthought, there were many cases where people say this applies, this doesn't apply. What happens in this case? So now you have to readdress it, and it happens with every law. This is the way contracts are written, and this is the way contracts are broken. You write a contract, you think you covered everything, then someone finds a way to bypass the contract. So now the next contract becomes more and more complicated, where sometimes simplicity is better when you say just the one line, and then you leave the rest for negotiations. Same thing happens with halakha. You write the halakha, you say, for example, you cannot do work on Shabbat. That should have been enough to define what is work. Okay, so people took this, don't do work on Shabbat, and they took it to an extreme, don't do anything on Shabbat. So everybody came and said, no, let's define it for you. Those are 39 categories, and they made the list. So now people look at the list. Okay, what is the difference between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4? So that's right. And there's an extreme statement in the Talmud that they say that 2 rabbis sat together and made a list of 39 subcategories for each one of the 39. So now we have 39 square. So this is where you should be careful, because in a way you look at the Ilchot Shabbat. If you really go thoroughly, it's like the what do we call in Israel the kickback question. The kickback is your military duffel bag that you have to drag everywhere. Until in a certain point during basic training, they say, okay, you could leave it behind, just bring your gun. That's it. Your gun and your immediate effort. I would say like your yeah. So there's always this soldier that when the transition is made and the commander says, okay, we're going to go to the shooting range, and he raises his hand, should we bring the kid back also? And everybody wants to kill him. Why? Keep quiet. The commander says, you know what? Yes. Yeah, bring it. Yeah. What? Yes. So this we call kickback question. If you ask it not necessary, if you present the problem, the answer will probably be, yeah, you can't do it. So it happens in the Ilchot Shabbat. After the initial period of Hachamim, when they tried to actually ameliorate the situation, make it easier for people, the following generation says, can I do that? Probably not. Can I do that? Probably not. And then they created the categories to describe why you cannot do that. Okay,
so if you ask, you better be careful.
You ask, you should be careful about what you ask.
No, it's better not.
Be careful what you wish for, sort of like.
This is all about creation during Shabbat.
Creation during Shabbat, being creative, right?
Because about work is, don't create on
right,
Shabbat.
Right.
Because that implies
right.
work.
Not creation in the physical world.
In the physical world.
But then you retreat into creating in the spiritual world,
yeah.
And it allows you to, right? But also another aspect of that, what Hachamim were mainly trying to prevent is work on the commercial level. So certain things they were not against. We'll see later on that one of the main melachot that they mentioned, which is actually they call it dash, the going over the grains in the threshing grounds, separating the wheat from the chaff. The rabbis derived from it the prohibition of separating juice from a fruit. For example, making wine or making oil. But there's an exception. If you need to make kiddush and you don't have wine, you could squeeze grapes and make kiddush on it. It seems that you could do it on Shabbat itself. We'll talk about it tomorrow.